Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday, the 2nd of June, and you're here at Lunch and Learn. Today, as advertised, Aaron will be talking about various aspects of software training. Some of these topics today will include recording QEEGs and stopping them, as well as can you play back a session. But there's some other questions that have arisen from the Wednesday session on artifacting and all kinds of electrical interference. So we're going to start off with that. So we get everybody unmuted. And I think, Judy, you had a question to start with, right?
We were wondering in the office about sometimes, you do all the things, you check the paste, you check the wire, you check it, and it still comes in a little crunchy on, say, one side, but yet the training efficiency is looking good. So we usually continue and go through it. But Aaron, I'd like your opinion on that and what you would do. Because usually I have one grown-up that it seems to happen to on one side for really no apparent reason. Doesn't matter the room. We've checked all the things you were talking about. But mostly it's with kids, the kiddos sometimes. So I'd like your opinion on it. If you're getting a decent training efficiency and it's not too crunchy. I guess crunchy is the word we use. I don't, little, thick and not as single lined kind of.
Right.
What's your opinion on that, Aaron?
I mean, with the NewMind software, I would do my best to try to figure out what's going on, but we all know we get those clients that, for whatever reason, their muscular system, something's going on that we just get constant issues either on one side or both. And that's the nice thing about having the auto artifacting built into the software. Because if we run a 30-minute session, let's say we're doing a standard 2-channel protocol, we've got a training efficiency of, say, 20 to 30, and we're still seeing some artifact maybe on one side. They're still getting a training session. It's like we talked about in the last webinar, when the software detects that artifact, it's just pausing all the feedback. So it's just kind of giving them basically a little break when they create artifact and not reinforcing that. So we may end up out of a 30-minute session, they may get 20 minutes of good training, let's say. And that's still better than nothing. We all know, we were talking about this before the webinar started. We've all seen it where, you get a kiddo in the office, and their ability to sit still is only maybe 15 minutes, and then they get distracted and start wiggling around. With those kids, we know we can just stop them at that 15-minute mark instead of torturing them and torturing us. We just run them a 15-minute session and they're still going to get improvement from that. It's no different than training like in a TBI situation, where their brain can't handle maybe more than 10 or 15 minutes. They're still going to get a session. Now, if you were using some kind of outdated software, something like BioExplorer, that does not have the ability to block out that artifact, I would be less likely to want to continue that session until I really figured out what the problem was. And sometimes, we look around the room, we look at them physically, but I've had cases where I had a client that just subconsciously kind of bit the inside of their lip. You couldn't physically see it from looking at them. And it took a while to actually figure out what was going on. And I said, is there anything you feel like you're doing? Because I can't see that you're moving, but I see there's artifact here. And it was after a few sessions, we discovered that for years and years, it was kind of a nervous tick that they just kind of bit the inside of their lip. And once we kind of figured that out, the sessions improved greatly, as far as what I saw on the screen. Now, granted, that was years and years back when I was using BioExplorer. So I kind of had to figure out, and that's the one thing I love about the NewMind software is that, it blocks all that out. So you're actually going to get a good training session. You know, and the fact that training efficiency staying up, what that's telling you is in between those events of artifact that they're actually training well. You know, because again, our software ignores all the data when artifact is occurring. You know, so it's not tracking amplitude of the signals, it's not tracking asymmetry. Of course, all the thresholds are paused. So therefore, there is no data being fed into all those numbers at the bottom of the screen. So with the NewMind software, when we end our session, all the data that's in front of us is the actual good, clean data, you know, of how they trained. So that's letting you know that, you know, you're on track with them. You know, now if you had that same situation, like you said, a crunchy signal, and at the end of the session, you know, with a 2-channel protocol, their training efficiency was 5 or 6, you know, then I'd be worried, because that's telling me now that even when they're not creating artifact, that their brain is struggling to keep up with the training. You know, so maybe we've got their target percent set too high. You know, maybe it's just that area of the brain not ready to respond yet. So, you know, if I had that same situation but a low training efficiency, that's when I would get worried, you know, and want to look into it farther and make some changes. You know, or look at how many filters we're training, and, you know, maybe can we drop some of those out? Or let's say you're doing a protocol 4, 2 to 7 down. You know, the 15 to 20 up and the 13 to 15 up are more supporting frequencies. You know, ideally when we're using 4, we're really just trying to target that delta and theta to come down in power. And so if they had a really low training efficiency on, let's say, a protocol 4, I may opt to try to bring the 15 to 20 up and the 13 to 15 up all the way up to a 90% target rate. That way, you know, it's kind of like how when we train high beta down, we generally, the default is it's at 90%. You know, we're just trying to lightly reinforce that, but we're not trying to heavily train it like other frequency bands that we may have set at a 75% target. You know, and just by bringing those two thresholds up, you know, we may see an improvement in the training efficiency, because now their brain really only has to focus on like the 2 to 7 down, you know, so we're just kind of easing up on them. That answer your question, Judy?
Oh, that was very useful. Very useful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And if anybody else has any questions related to Wednesday's webinar on Artifact, feel free. I think we've got most people unmuted at this point. So feel free.
I missed Wednesday, but I have, for years I've had one of those little red, looks like a felt tip pen thingies that you stick near a socket and it flickers if it's hot.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, I pulled it out and went over my dining room table where I have one of those charging towers and my laptop hooked up and my phone charging, and every wire, I mean, there's like about some point of a 1 foot zone of current going on, and a couple times I tried using my Cardia near it, and it's telling me there's electrical interference. So that's something you have to watch. If there's any, you know, any hot cord coming from the computer or near the person, even if their cell phone is on,
yeah,
that can, I don't know how sensitive the equipment is, but that can be picked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our high and low pass filters that are built into the amps are designed to kind of block what we can. But that is, you know, something good to talk about is cable management in your rooms. You know, I've always trained clinics, you know, that when you set your equipment up, because we're generally, most of us are using laptops, you know, so you really have kind of a couple cables to manage. You know, you've got your USB cable connecting your amplifier to the computer, And then you've got your power cable keeping the charge up on the laptop. I've always tried to instruct people, you want about a 1 foot separation minimum between those two cables. I've seen people that want everything super neat and tidy, and they'll actually kind of wrap the USB cable and all the power cables together, you know, to kind of make it look neater. But you do get bleed through, you know, from that power cable. Now, if you get a heavily shielded USB cable, that can minimize that. You know, so a shielded cable, they actually have braided wire casing, you know, between the actual communication wires and that outer rubber sheath. You know, so that does help minimize the interference. Also, the ferrite magnets we talked about, you can buy them to just clip on. Those can help reduce some of that interference before it actually gets into the computer. But just really kind of cable separation, you know, and don't have more electronics on in the room than what you necessarily need. You know, like Michael was saying, you know, everything was that he had plugged in was outputting, you know, a 60 hertz field. You know, so just trying to minimize what you put in your neurofeedback space, you know, especially we talked about that, no backup battery supplies, and that can really help, you know, just reduce any possible interference, you know, between other devices and, you know, the neurofeedback amplifier. And then for anybody that uses photic, I know there's some that do, some that don't. I'm going to be talking about that here. Rob's got it on the schedule, I think sometime next week, Wednesday, I believe.
Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, Judy. So photic, you know, the cable for those glasses, it's not a super heavy shielded cable, you know, just because they have to be light and flexible. So we have to be mindful of the cable to the photic glasses comparatively to where like our sensors are, because of course our sensor wires also need to be light and flexible. So we can't put heavy, you know, shielding in those. It's just not possible. They'd be too stiff. You know, it adds so much more weight. You know, trying to keep the sensors on would be difficult. But with photic, you actually get a pulse of energy in that cable that connects the glasses to the amplifier. So if that glass cable is near or touching one of your sensors, especially if it's an active sensor, like a channel 1 or 2, you can pick up interference there as well. And that one's a little bit harder to kind of figure out because, you know, it's, you know, sometimes we might be doing, let's say, a 14 hertz on the left and an 18 on the right. So what you would see in your raw data line, you know, if you're picking up interference from the glass cable, would be that frequency band. You know, you would see either more of a consistent 14 hertz or a consistent 18 hertz signal. You know, so we want to be really mindful that, you know, when you use photic, that you just keep that cable separated from, you know, the sensors. And as long as you've got even a couple inches, you should be good. You just definitely don't want them touching one another. Any other questions tied to Artifact?
This is Andrea. What was the device mentioned to measure? It's something about a red dot on it. What was that?
Michael, do you know the name of that? I know what you're talking about, but you can also get a Gauss meter.
Yeah, there's the trimeters. If you look on do a Google search, and some phones have it. I don't know that I trust the phone apps, but this thing was a circuit alert. GB is the Gardner Bender is the manufacturer, I guess.
Let's see if I can find
It
it.
takes a couple AAA or one AAA battery.
Yeah, I mean, you can get them. I know they sell them like at Home Depot.
Yeah.
If you
Probably
go
where I
into
got.
where all the electrician tools are, you'll see like power test meters and other stuff, and you'll see it there, and it just looks like an oversized marker with a little red tip on it. And electricians use them to just quickly test if an outlet's hot. You know, before they work on it, you just kind of stick it up to the outlet, and if the light glows, you know, that's telling you there's actually, it's picking up power there.
Thank you.
See if I can find an image. There's one. Yep, that's what they sell at Home Depot. So here, let me just pop this up. Right there. So that's all it is. You know, like Michael was saying, battery powered. You just turn the power button on and get this end, like they're showing there, near a source of power. And if it glows, it's telling you it's picking up power there. So, a little simple, $20. Other questions?
I have electrical recliners, and so I like to, my clients get into their comfortable position and then I unplug it, because I have found that has caused some interruption in my EEG.
Yes. Yeah, and that's, since you brought that up, Veronica, yeah, I had a clinic years ago that we were trying to diagnose electrical interference. And I wasn't even thinking about the chair itself. I'm just assuming that they're using a desk chair or a recliner. Come to find out, they actually had a massage chair. They thought it would be really cool if their clients could get a little massage while they were doing neurofeedback, keep them relaxed, which it was a good idea in theory, you know, but in practice, you know, all those little motors humming away was just causing massive electrical interference, and the fact that the client was actually sitting on top of all those motors. So yeah, you want to make sure you don't have any power in the chair itself. So yeah, if you've got a power recliner, yeah, I would definitely do that as well as unplug it. And that goes too for like heat pads or anything like that. You just don't want to have anything powered. Any other questions on artifact interference? All right, and so we got some questions that came in from Andrea regarding session playback was one of them. So let's just kind of bring a training protocol up. Let's use this one. Oops. All right, so let me just run just a couple seconds of data here, just so we can get to the end. Okay, so this is what we all see at the end of a training session with our client. And we have an option here, we see just to save it. We have an option to save with playback, you know, or, you know, we can just discard it and throw it away and nothing's saved anywhere. So the difference between these two save buttons, if you just click save and you have an active software subscription, then the software is going to export all the data from this session to newmindmaps.com. And then we'll have that data to look at later in the training sessions tab to be able to review not only trend graphs, but amplitude of power of signals, the asymmetry, so on. Now there is a save with playback button. Okay, so if you click the save with playback, it will create a EDF file So if I just kind of show you where they all live. So if you go into, say, this PC, Windows C drive, you want to program files, x86, and then we find the NewMind training folder, the data folder, into the EDF, and now we have brain maps and training sessions. Now you do have a shortcut to this folder on your desktop. That gets created when you install the software. So you could just, to find these training sessions, you could easily click on the shortcut for the brain maps folder, and then just up here, come back one, click on EDF, and then you have training sessions. So these are the files you get if you click Save with Playback. Now, the question Andrea had was, how do I play those back? Okay, so when this was created, the development team created the ability to save them. But there was, kind of a question posed at that time of, well, how many clinics actually ever go back and play back a recording? And from what I understand, Dr. Suter spoke with a bunch of his colleagues. And what the end outcome was that everyone said they really never played a session back. So, that got everyone thinking, well, do we want to spend the time and the energy finishing up the coding in the software to allow a playback, or do we just kind of let that go? So you can save an EDF file from a training session and play it back, but just currently not through the actual software. So the way you would do that is just, if you wanted to ever have a session for playback, so let's say you were running a specific session on a client and you noticed there was just some weird anomalies happening, and you wanted the ability to play that session back and look at it in detail. There's a couple little steps you have to do to be able to get that accomplished. So you would need a piece of software. It's called the EDF browser. So if you just go to Google, search EDF browser, it's this first one that comes up. Their website is a little difficult, kind of, once you get in there to look at. But if you just, once this loads up, if you just keep scrolling down through all the features and everything at the top, you'll get to this download section. And then they've got different versions depending on your operating system. So most of you, you're going to be doing this on the Windows computer that you have our software loaded on. So you want this option, 64-bit for Windows 7 or later. Just click on the link. It'll download that zip file, and then you'll just go through a standard installation process like any other piece of software. And then once that's loaded up and you open it, what you're going to do is click on File and then Open. Now, currently, this software, because I've been kind of using it and going back, just playing around with this, is remembering the folder that I told it to go to last time. But again, you could go to your desktop, find the shortcut for brain maps. When you get there, just come back one, go into training sessions, and then these are all playable files. So all you would have to do is click on that, choose Open. So here we can see it was just a 2-channel protocol, FP1, FP2. They're already pre-highlighted, so we're just going to click Add, and then we're going to click Add Signals. And there's our 2 signals. So then at the bottom, you've got, it's kind of like a movie player. You can just click play. That's going to start running it back. If I wanted to, I could, where is it? Let's see, there we go. So they have the amplitude section. You can choose the amplitude of your signal. You know, so if you need to see it a little bigger. If I stop it here, I can advance it manually. So you've got just like a video player that you use on your computer, and you can go through and look at it and see everything. So that's the only way at this point you can play these back and look at them. You've got your time down here, so you know. There's also, yeah, and this is telling you this is 10 seconds per division. So that's, you know, 10 seconds. So you got about 90 seconds worth of data, you know, in just one screen here. You know, and this is also what we would use to play back a recording of a brain map. So Jason and I will use this if we're on a call with a clinic and they say, yeah, I had some weird stuff come up, you know, and we'll request that EDF file from them for the brain map, and then we can go through and look at it and actually see the signals. Now, as far as a brain map's concerned, you could also look at it in our EEG edit tool. But the EDF browser, the lines are a lot more sensitive than what you would see in our EDF browser. So I kind of like the EDF browser for just reviewing the recordings, but I have used our edit tool as well. You know, I'll take a file that has artifact in it and plug it in there just so I can see it all. So that is how you would go about doing that. Does that answer your question, Andrea, on playing back stuff?
It does. It's really nice to see. Thank you. If you were to put this next to the monitor that had the EEG in NewMind, do they look identical, or are they, like, because of the math and stuff, it's displayed differently?
Yeah, it's, you know, the lines I can bring up. Now, you couldn't import a training session though into the edit tool. Just because our EEG edit tool is going to be looking for a 19-point recording. Now, if you wanted to review, let's say, a map, so let's just do this. I'll see if we can get up the same map in two different ones. So let's go to brain maps. Go to this guy. So let's bring this one up. What is 99? Add all those signals. Okay. Okay, so there's this recording here. So now if I bring up that same recording, so I mean, this one over here, I've got the amplitude turned up. So if I bring it down somewhat, you know, we're starting to see it's pretty similar, but you can just notice it's the EDF browser, their line weight is a lot thinner. So you see a lot more of the little movements, you know, where ours is a little thicker line, but we still see it's roughly the same. You know, if I keep kind of adjusting the amplitude, you know, you kind of see that, you know, it kind of thins out a little bit, you know, but you're going to be getting roughly the same data. It's just in our EDF browser, there's no option to blow it up, you know, as far as amplitude's concerned, you know, so, you know, it'll be similar, but slightly different. but you can still kind of recognize, whether there's artifact or not. Here, like you can see, like here's CZ, and you can see kind of these humps in here, and we see them here as well, and that's kind of a cascading through, a lot of the bands right here, and that's kind of what we see here. It's that same. So they're similar but slightly different. It just depends on kind of how you want to look at it. As far as a brain map is concerned, the edit tool works, except you have to, just physically advance it, to get through your data stream, and then we separate it into multiple pages. Whereas with the EDF browser, we can just click play and run through the whole recording, and just stop it when we need to look at something. But you can't do any editing in here. This is more just for, visual, to go back and look to see what happened. Now I would tell people, if you are getting some really weird, strange signals, let's say you're running training sessions and you just can't figure out what it is, at the end of that session, choose the save with playback. And that way you can get that file to me. And then I can get my eyes on it, and I can normally detect, or be able to tell you what's going on. But if I can't, I'll always get Dr. Suter's eyes on it. He's been looking at artifact for well over 20 years. I know it's a subject that fascinates him. So if all else fails, we get Dr. Suter to look at it, and between the team, we can generally narrow down what the issue is, based off the type of artifact we're seeing, whether it's, like I said, that short burst, if it's showing up more like a delta signal, or if it's more of that contracted muscle tension where you get that high amplitude compressed signal. That kind of narrows it down. Or if we see a very repetitive pattern in a beta frequency, and that's generally coming from electrical sources, just the way our low and high pass filters kind of overlap. The signal that we would see is around a 15 hertz signal with electrical artifacts. So, you look at enough of these and you can kind of say, yeah, this is a normal signal versus, yeah, that's abnormal. Like when we see here, these peaks and then the valley, and then it kind of stabilizes, we know this is all artifact, and it's just cascading through the whole frontal section of the brain. As we move kind of more posterior through central, temporal, parietals, it kind of dissipates and we really don't see it. So we know this is probably an eye blink. It's just showing up through, all 6 of the frontal training sites, FP1, FP2, F7, F8, and F3, F4. We just see it going all the way through, and it's actually even affecting FZ here. And by the time that eye blink got to CZ, it's really kind of dissipated. We really don't see much at C3, C4, the temporals. There's kind of little, these little tiny bumps, but not like what we see up here. So if we kept seeing signals like this in a playback, we know it's something they're doing. Either they're emoting to maybe a movie that we shouldn't have let them watch to begin with. Action scene, they get really surprised, eyes open wide type of thing. Or maybe you've got a client that just has dry eyes. You've got a client that's got a pair of contacts that should have been changed out 2 months ago. Things of that nature, versus, if we saw the artifacts, kind of cascading through central and temporal, we would know that's more related to jaw tension or something inside their mouth. They're moving their tongue around, they're biting the inside of their lip, they're pressing their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Versus if we saw all the artifact down here, you know, just kind of cascading through, you know, parietal, occipital, then we know it's generally caused from neck muscles. You know, so it's, again, like we talked about on Wednesday, you know, if you get somebody with neck problems, whether that's just really tight muscles, or they actually, maybe they should be seeing a chiropractor more often, you know, they've got subluxations in the cervical vertebrae, you know, that are in turn putting tension on those muscles, you know, then we would see that, you know, showing up down here. And we could just advise them at that point, hey, we're continually seeing this kind of tension artifact. You know, anytime, you know, we map or train, you know, at the back of your head, you know, do you generally have, you know, tension in your neck? Have you, you know, do you regularly see a chiropractor, or have you been going to a chiropractor and just haven't been in a while? And then we just might want to make the recommendation of, hey, maybe a massage and a little chiropractic care, you know, would go a long way to, you know, not only helping you relax, but, you know, improving the quality of your neurofeedback sessions.
Aaron,
Yes.
chime in. I had a kid once who came in after an orthodontic adjustment,
Mhm.
and he had all sorts of muscle tension. We were trying to figure it out, and I never had orthodonture, but I hear that it can be painful when they tighten things up. But anyway, we talked about it and figured out that it was probably due to that. And he opened his mouth and shot his rubber bands across the room, which I thought was cool, or at least the 10-year-old in me did pre-COVID. So that's yet another thing to look for. It's rare, but it's there.
Yes. And for those of you that aren't aware, you know, Dr. Suter did a 2-part series specifically on artifact. Let's see if I can bring these up quick for you, just kind of show you where they're all at.
Before you leave this screen, you can adjust the montages somewhere on that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's up here.
Because that's a nice way to look at frontal versus rear or left versus right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can adjust it however you want to. Even when you, if I were to close this out, you know, if I just want to, let's say, same recording, but let's say I just want to look at everything in the frontal. I can just select those signals, add them, click add signals, you know, and now I've got less data in my face, you know, and I can just look at them separately, you know, to make it easier. So yeah, you can do a lot with this. There's a lot of features in this that I'm still learning. You know, I had no use for this until I started working at NewMind, because the soft in BioExplorer, it records an epics file, which you can't import really anywhere. You know, it's a very useless file outside of, you know, the platform. But there is, if you guys do download this, go to the help section. They've got an online manual, and you can just go through and they'll spell everything out for you on how to do it, what it does, you know, how that's going to affect your signals. So, you know, definitely look into that. And then I'll just bring up our YouTube channel. I was like reminding people that these videos exist. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's in here. It's right up in the EEG basics. This is Dr. Suter wanted this playlist right at the top. So these EEG basics, especially for those of you that are on the webinar or listen to this later, these are all the webinars Dr. Suter has done that he feels are must see, especially for somebody new into the field, and even for some of us who have been in the field, you know, well over 10 years. Sometimes it's not bad to go back and just get a refresher on some of this stuff. But in these two videos, identifying artifact part 1 and part 2, Dr. Suter really just kind of broke down all different types of artifact, and I was a little shocked when I watched these, because there was stuff that he was showing that I never imagined would carry through into an EEG signal. One of those was just somebody gently tapping their toe, like along the music, and you could see the pulse of the toe taps in the EEG signal. He was actually showing artifact of hair that was rubbing against an ear clip. So I would say if you got some time, it's 2 hours worth, or actually you got an hour in the first part, half an hour in the second part, so an hour and a half of your time, you can really learn a lot about artifact, different types of artifact, what those different signals look like, especially when you're looking at the signals through like the EDF browser software or in our edit tool. You really get a good idea. And for those of you that have never used this EEG edit tool and you're kind of afraid to, just click on this help button up here. If you guys didn't know these were here, here you go. But right here, the second video is Dr. Suter goes through, and actually edits an EDF file right in front of you. So he's just walking through all the steps necessary. He's pointing out different artifact, and why that is artifact. So you could watch this. This is a lot shorter. This is about 20 or 30 minutes, but good video to watch if you've never edited an EEG. And that kind of brings us to, I think, another question Andrea had was about mapping and stopping a map partway through. So just so everybody knows, let's get out of here. If you're recording a brain map, it's different than running a training session. So when we run a training session, and let's say we get 15 minutes through a training session, and our client's antsy, whatever's going on, maybe they get into a coughing fit, who knows what it is, but we have to stop partway through. When you stop a training session, you do have the ability to save the session up to that point, whether that was 2 minutes or 28 minutes, you can save that data and it gets exported out of the software and imported into NewMind Maps. Unlike doing a brain map, so this, I just brought up a 20 channel, but once this gets past the baseline, which is generally going to be 20 or 30 seconds on average for a quiet and relaxed client. Once the timer starts, you're pretty much committed at that point to recording all the way through to the end. So we'll see, we do have a stop recording button, but if I click stop and then confirm, that data is gone. It does not get saved. The software just throws it away and there's nothing left. So, and I think part of your question, Andrea, was like shutting off the auto artifact just to get it to go. Is that correct? I'm trying to read through this.
Yeah, I saw changes. Oh, yeah, it wasn't running. I mean, the map had actually was stopping, and it was stopping for too long. It wasn't stopping and then starting again in 3 seconds. It was stopping for 5 or 10 seconds or something, and I could see some of the issues on the screen. So it wasn't, some kind of technical error or something. I could see changes. So yeah, I tried during a session to turn off, during a map to turn off auto artifact.
Okay. And Andrew, are you using a 4-channel or a 20-channel amplifier?
I thought it was 19, but I guess
19, yeah. We call it 20 because we include ground in that. So with
Okay.
ground, that's 20. Okay, so for those of you that have a 20-channel, so again, let's kind of run through that again, of what we would do. So let's say we've got the timer set at a default of 2 minutes. So that's where our software defaults to if that recognizes you have the 20-channel amp. So here I'll flip this over to the 19-channel count, and we see that's 2 minutes. So let's say, we start this up, and like Andrea said, we're telling it we want 2 minutes, and we want 2 minutes of that timer is telling us we want 2 minutes of clean, artifact-free data. So, and I think a lot of us have probably been put in this situation where, and this software is getting crazy, where we're doing the recording and we noticed that, and I actually had a clinic that came back and they were using a 4-channel recording 1 minute per location. So it should have been a 5-minute recording if they had a really relaxed client. And the response I got from them is it took an hour to acquire the eyes closed and the eyes open. And they made a comment to me that that just wasn't like conducive in their clinic. So if you run into that situation, especially with a 20-channel, it's really easy. You're just going to stop the recording and confirm that. You will lose that data. But then what you're going to do is you're going to drop back to this screen, click on record brain map again, and that will bring the timer back up. So you only have access to this timer when the test connections button is present. So again, if I'm doing a 19, what I'm going to do is bump this up to 4 to 5 minutes. And then start my recording. Eventually it'll kick in. And then I'm going to turn off the auto artifact detection. So now what I'm doing is I'm just recording 5 minutes of data. I'm recording the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's everything. It's artifact. It's the clean signals. Now, if you record 5 minutes, eyes closed, 5 minutes, eyes open, okay, you're only like 12 minutes, let's say, of total recording time, because you're going to have to talk to them in between eyes closed and eyes open and give them instructions. Maybe let them get a sip of water, cough, sneeze, whatever they need to do. So from that point, you'll have your eyes closed and eyes open recordings. You'll have 5 minutes of data total. Then you can import that into the edit tool and just go through and select all the good data. Now, you need 30 seconds of clean data to actually create a map and a report. So if you record 5 minutes, you can generally pull 30 seconds out of that. This is the exact process I do when I record a map on my dad. Like I mentioned Wednesday, he had a stroke years ago. He gets involuntary kind of eye squints and there's twitches and other stuff that he just can't control. And understanding that, I'm not going to torture him and I'm not going to torture myself, by trying to tell him to stop doing something because the timer's paused and it's been paused for 30 seconds. So I use a 20-channel. I turn off the auto artifact detection and I just record 5 minutes eyes open, 5 minutes eyes closed. I'm actually doing them in reverse order. I do eyes closed first and eyes open. And then that way I can just take the cap off them, let them go get cleaned up. Neither one of us are stressed out. And then, the only downfall is I have to spend, 10, 15 minutes running that through the edit tool to get my clean data, but I get clean maps every time doing it that way. Now, for those of you using a 4-channel, you can do the same process. So if we're on a 4-channel count, you can bump this up, but keep in mind, you've got 5 of these to do. So whatever number here, multiply by 5, and that's what it's going to take. So if I did a 3-minute recording, now it's going to take me a total at least a half an hour to acquire eyes open and eyes closed. If I bump that up and do a 5-minute, now you're 25 minutes, so you're pushing close to an hour long, appointment. So the 4-channel, it's going to take longer. It's just how it is. But if you just add some extra time in, potentially with a 3-minute recording, you might be able to pull 30 seconds of data out of that. It's just hard to say. Now, I've also had situations where no matter what I do, a certain set of locations, it's just solid artifact. I've had that happen where FZ might be showing it, or you get some of these ones up front, FZ or F7, F8, FP1, FP2. In those cases, sometimes I'll still let it go, and I just select that data when I do the edit, because it's just constant through the entire recording. It's either I have 2 choices. I either have to throw all that data away and try to remap them, or I just choose that data, and then when I go look at the map, I ignore those locations. I already know the database is going to recommend that I train in those locations, because the artifact just makes them end up being for the worst areas in the brain. So I just ignore the protocol recommendation. I ignore the locations, and I look at everything else, and, generally I'm working most of the time more in the dorsal stream anyways, unless I'm working T3, T4. So if it is F7 and F8, I'm generally not going to be as concerned. But another thing, let's say you've got a new client, it's a kid, and you want to know before you waste any time, am I going to have to shut off the auto artifacting or not? With kids, or let's say you've got even an adult that maybe has an essential tremor, or maybe they have a little small tic disorder somewhere like facial muscles. Instead of running in the order that we have them set, I wouldn't go top to bottom here with them. I'm going to start with FP1, FP2, and PZ, because FP1 and FP2 are known to be very artifact prone sites, especially in kids. If they're looking around, making faces, you're going to see it here first. So I would start there and just see, can I make it through? How long does it take to get a minute of recording there with the auto artifact turned on? So I would click start here first, and then, wait for the data to come in. I don't know what's going on with my software. I think I'm freaking it out this morning. But I'm going to wait, first of all, and see how long does it take to acquire this baseline. Does it take 20 seconds? Does it take 30 seconds? Am I a minute in and the timer still hasn't started? If I'm getting close to a minute and the timer hasn't started, the software has posted another thing to you saying, hey, the baseline's taking longer than expected, then I know, if the timer hasn't started within a minute, if I leave the auto artifact detection on, I'm going to be here forever. You know, it's going to be at least an hour, could be longer. You know, and I never want to keep a client in a cap for that long. We all know they're not the most comfortable things to wear. Hopefully you're all using the sponge discs that ElectroCap makes to go over FP1 and FP2 when we're doing these recordings. So the sensors aren't digging into their forehead, because you can pick up a lot of artifact just from that. But what I would do in a case like this, if that timer hadn't started, I would have to stop the recording and confirm that. And again, I have to back up to the brain map menu, go back in and record a map. And then once that screen loads up, then I'll have that option to adjust the timer. You know, so, and you'll have to use kind of your own experience. You know, while you're watching those signals and you're seeing all the artifact, is trying to kind of put together, you know, how much clean signal have I seen comparatively to artifact? You know, because that's going to tell you kind of more how much time you're going to need to add in, because you're going to have to shut off that auto artifact detection. So if during that minute of just kind of testing, I saw half of the time I was getting a clean signal, the other half of the time it was artifact, you know, I'm probably going to do maybe 3 minutes and keep my fingers crossed that that's enough and that I don't have to remap this kid in a week. If I'm seeing that, you know, 60, 70% of the time it's artifact and then the rest is clean signal, I'm going to have to go to 4 or 5 minutes. It's going to be a long recording, you know, but that's the only way I'm going to acquire that map. You know, and then there's some people, and then I think some of us have had these clients that no matter what you do, it's just all artifact. You know, so for them, if they really needed neurofeedback, I might skip the map and start off with some SMR for a bit, you know, and at least train them there. Maybe do an SMR with a high beta down, you know, kind of start working on, we know will definitely help with sleep. We'll give the brain some stability. The high beta down should help relax them a little bit, you know, and then maybe try to come back, you know, 10 sessions, 15 sessions SMR later, you know, and try to acquire the map again, you know, and just kind of do the best you can. You're going to run into those clients that mapping them is just going to be a chore, and unfortunately, there's no way around it.
Hey, Aaron?
Yep.
I just had a thought on somebody like your dad, where artifact is part of his life. If you just left it in and then remapped him and see if there's any decrease in the artifact, I'm not sure how you would exactly do that, but you know, if the map shows some change for the better, that may be a question.
With him is due to the stroke, he's got heavy beta spindling in the front.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's a whole nother thing to deal with, you know, with training protocols and whatnot. But yeah, that beta spindling is another one that, you know, our software just views it as artifact, you know, and it's trainable.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm thinking leave it, don't artifact it, leave it in, and then see if there's a change. Mm-hmm. With the spindling, you may have to just count the, I don't know, the episodes or the length of them or something like that manually, but it's just a thought.
Yeah, and
Aaron, just so you know, we're about 10 after the hour.
Yeah, I know. I just looked down at the clock myself and saw that. So
just to give you an update. All right.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up here. I know everyone's got clients. Hopefully it's a light day on a Friday for you. And we'll be back Monday night. We can topics. If anybody wants to put a request in for a topic, email Rob, email myself, and just give us those topics and we'll cover that for you.
And we'll also, I'll just note a review of the past 2 days and then any new topics that get suggested. So we'll have people understand they can review, you know, ask questions. All righty, perfect. Hey, thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome, Rob. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Good stuff. Bye, everybody. See you Monday.
Bye.